Welcome back to the Physics of Faith podcast. My name is Tim.
And I'm Tommy.
And we are in Daniel chapter 3 today. Tommy, anything you want to talk about for the last two chapters?
Well, the last time you left off mentioning that there are many times when Nebuchadnezzar goes up and he goes down, and he kind of has some praise, and then he goes off the deep end, and it's like right away here. Like we just finished talking about how he said that your God is greater than all the other gods, and it's not really a full worship because he's not saying he is the God. He is saying your God is greater than all of the other gods.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And even says like, hey, your God is the Lord of Kings.
Yeah.
But then as we see here, still thinks very highly of himself as the king.
Right. Yeah.
All right. So why don't we just jump into the text then? We're going to go ahead and start here in chapter 3. We're going to read verses 1 through 7. All right. Nebuchadnezzar, the king, made a statue of gold, the height of which was 60 cubits and its width 6 cubits. He set it up on the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. Nebuchadnezzar the king also sent word to assemble the satraps and prefects and the governors, the counselors, the chief treasurers, the judges, the magistrates, and all the administrators of the provinces to come to the dedication of the statue that Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. Then the satraps, the prefects, and the governors, the counselors, the chief treasurers, the judges, the magistrates, and all the administrators of the provinces were assembled for the dedication of the statue that Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up, and they stood before the statue that Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Then the herald loudly proclaimed, "To you the command is given, you peoples, nations, and populations of all languages, that at the moment you hear the sound of the horn, flute, lyre, trigon, psaltery, bagpipe, and all kinds of musical instruments, you are to fall down and worship the golden statue that Nebuchadnezzar the king has set up. But whoever does not fall down and worship shall immediately be thrown into the middle of a furnace of blazing fire." Therefore, as soon as all the peoples heard the sound of the horn, flute, lyre, trigon, psaltery, bagpipe, and all kinds of musical instruments, all the peoples, nations, and populations of all languages fell down and worshipped the golden statue that Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. All right, so here we are. This is another one of. So Daniel's got a number of famous stories.
Yeah.
Right, and we're starting off with one of those here in chapter 3.
Yeah.
So he builds this gold statue, and here's something that's interesting. The text doesn't really say this, but what is the statue of?
Yeah.
Right? It's a statue of gold, right? And it's this giant statue, and they're supposed to worship it. Mm-hmm. So some people have interpreted it that this is a statue of the king, right? Other people could say that, well, it's one of his gods, or it's whoever he gives glory to for providing him this. One thing we know is that it's not a representation of the God, right? And it is something that he has created and placed.
Yeah, so I have the NIV, and mine says made an image of gold.
Yeah. So it's an image of gold.
Something, yeah.
Yeah. And this was done on the plains of Dura. Now, something we know from history and from archaeology now is that on the plains of Dura, there does stand today a rectilinear mound about 20 feet high, an exact square of about 46 feet at the base, resembling the pedestal of a colossal statue. So this is something that, like, history shows us was very probably a real thing.
Certainly possible, yeah.
Yeah. I also think this is really interesting. So Babylon, this is where the Tower of Babel was built.
Yeah.
And the point of Babel was to exalt themselves above God, right? This is the sin that King Nebuchadnezzar continues to make, is to exalt things and to exalt his kingdom and himself above the glory of God.
Yeah.
And here he does it by, assuming he can determine what people are supposed to worship and what they aren't supposed to worship.
Yeah.
Right? And one of the things that Babylon is doing is it's conquering all these other nations. And when he brings them all together, he talks about all of your different tribes and tongues and languages.
Yeah.
What happened at the Tower of Babel?
Yeah.
Right? They were confused by God and they all began speaking different languages and they went off.
Yeah.
Right? So Babylon is basically trying to continue the work that it was doing at the Tower of Babel.
Yeah.
It's trying to bring all that back and say, we're going to still conquer everything. We're still going to exalt ourselves above God. And we're going to even do it with all these different tongues and all these different languages. And nothing can set itself against us.
Yeah.
Right? And so in that, they say, so you're going to worship what we tell you to worship, or we're going to throw you into a furnace.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, and I can't remember. This was actually just something I thought of now, because I can't remember where else it talks about this. And I think it's in the New Testament, probably Paul, where he talks about people that worship these idols. Like, okay, think about how ridiculous this is. You go in and make gold, and you take ore out of the ground. You go in and you take all of these things, and you build it.
Yeah.
And then you worship this thing that you made.
Yeah.
Like, how ridiculous is that? Like, you think that this thing that, you think that this thing that you just created is going to save you or help you or bring you whatever it is that you need. You're worshiping your creation that you just saw you make. How ridiculous,
Right.
And when we think at modern times, obviously one of the 10 commandments is to not worship idols, and so we think in modern times, well, we don't do this. Like, we don't bow down and worship images or statues or things like that.
Right.
But we do worship idols.
Yeah.
They're just in a different form. They're people. They're politicians. They're sports. They're ideas of thought. These are our idols. And when we think about it in that same way, they're things that we've made. People worship politicians. Well, they're not in power unless they're only in office because we voted them there. A celebrity, a singer, a actor, whoever is only famous because we went to watch their stuff.
Yeah.
So we gave them that celebrity. And so it's just another way to. While we look at it this way, like, oh yeah, we don't really do that now. We do. It's just in a different way.
Yeah, well, I think there's the expression about having your sacred cows.
Yeah,
and I know it kind of comes out of a Eastern philosophy, but it's really a statement about putting a reverence into something that maybe you shouldn't be putting your reverence into. Right? Yeah. And like that's absolutely what we do here, as you just stated, with people, with ideologies, with systems, with all of these different things. Mm-hmm. We have these sacred cows that we refuse to do away with.
Yeah.
And we keep them in these places of reverence and honor, but none of them compare to the knowledge of Christ.
Right.
Right. That's good. And it's interesting because, as you state, just like these idols, a lot of these things were built by hands.
Yeah.
Right. People's careers are built. People, ideologies are formulated and discussed, right? Mm-hmm. They're all within our realm of duplication.
Yeah.
Right? There is a God who is outside of that, who can do what we cannot do.
Yeah.
And we do not afford him the same reverence of what we do with ourselves.
Right.
Right. Really, worshiping an idol is worshiping yourself.
Yeah.
If you really think about it.
Yeah. I mean, when you think about, great athletes, well, the only reason they're as great as they are, or as well known as they are, is because people paid money to watch them.
Yeah.
Michael Jordan is considered the greatest basketball player of all time. Well, why is that such a big deal? Because in the 90s, millions of people paid millions of dollars to watch him go play basketball all over the country, And so again, that is human done. We decided to do that. Jeff Bezos is a bajillionaire. Why is Jeff Bezos a billionaire? Because we're all too lazy to go to the store, and so it's much easier to buy it off of Amazon than it is to get in the car and go to the store.
True.
We've made him a billionaire.
Yeah. Yeah. All of these things are built with our own hands, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's go ahead and continue. We're going to look at verses 8 through 12. Also, I do want to just mention real quick, you definitely just aged us on this podcast. You said that Michael Jordan is the greatest.
Yeah. Well, Well, I was trying to talk about the greatest of all time, and I don't like Tom Brady, so I'm much more.
I go to Wayne Gretzky. I think everybody can agree.
That
on Wayne
you know what,
Gretzky.
that is true.
Yeah.
That is there is very little doubt. Yeah, in basketball, there's some debate. There's some debate in golf. There's some debate in baseball, football. Yeah, there's some debate, but you really can't debate Wayne Gretzky.
There is a video somewhere of Wayne Gretzky having a foot race with some of these other major athletes.
Oh, is there really?
And he wins.
Of course he did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, anyway, we digress. You can see who my idol was. All right. So we're going to look at verses 8 through 12. For this reason, at that time, certain Chaldeans came forward and brought charges against the Jews. They began to speak and said to Nebuchadnezzar the king, O king, live forever. You, O king, have made a decree that every person who hears the sound of the horn, flute, lyre, trigon, psaltery, and bagpipe, and all kinds of musical instruments, is to fall down and worship the golden statue. But whoever does not fall down and worship shall be thrown into the middle of a furnace of blazing fire. There are certain Jews whom you have appointed over the administrations of the province of Babylon, namely Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These men, O king, have disregarded you. They do not serve your gods, nor do they worship the golden statue which you have set up. All right. So you remember in the last chapter, we talked about how Daniel said, hey, save these other soothsayers, save these wise men, right? Don't kill them.
Mm-hmm.
But these wise men immediately, out of either jealousy or disrespect or, maybe it's some type of loyalty to the king, I don't know,
Yeah.
immediately throw Daniel's friends under the bus.
Yeah. Immediately turn on them.
And I asked the question, where was Daniel during this?
Yeah.
But Daniel could be about business somewhere else.
Yeah, and that's what I've read as well, because I had the same thought, is that because he was the king of Babylon, but there's all of these smaller areas that had their own kind of leaders, and that's actually who he's inviting to, are these governors and these magistrates and all of these other people.
Yeah.
Yes, and so it is. We imagine that Daniel is off tending to business somewhere else, which is why he's not there.
Right, exactly. But these three are there.
Yeah.
And they are ratted out, So something else I want to point out real quick is the term Chaldean. Okay.
Yeah.
So you see the term Chaldean brought up a number of times. We've mentioned it a number of times here in Daniel. I don't think I've mentioned this before, but Chaldean is a dual meaning word.
Mm-hmm.
So Chaldean could be the people of Babylon. They could basically be what they call Babylonians.
Yeah.
But they also referred to their priests as Chaldeans. So
in the NIV, every time you say Chaldeans, it says astrologers.
Yeah. So this is not talking about just random Babylonians. This is specifically astrologers, priests, or people who did the soothsaying.
Yeah.
Basically. All right. So why don't we jump down to verses 13 through 18. All right. Then Nebuchadnezzar, in rage and anger, gave orders to bring Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Then these men were brought before the king. Nebuchadnezzar began speaking and said to them, Is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods, nor worship the golden statue that I have set up? Now, if you are ready at the moment you hear the sound of the horn, flute, lyre, trigon, psaltery, and bagpipe, and all kinds of musical instruments, to fall down and worship the statue that I have made, very well. But if you do not worship, you will immediately be thrown into the midst of a furnace of blazing fire. And what God is there who can rescue you from my hands? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied to the king, Nebuchadnezzar, we are not in need of an answer to give you concerning this matter. If it be so, our God, whom we serve, is able to rescue us from the furnace of blazing fire. And he will rescue us from your hand, O king. But even if he does not, let it be known to you, O king, that we are not going to serve your gods, nor worship the golden statue that you have set up. All right. So this is interesting. The first thing I want to point out here, so when Nebuchadnezzar builds this statue and gives this decree, he doesn't even realize they're not complying.
Yeah.
Right? They're just non-compliant.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't go make some kind of formal complaint or some kind of stand or post all over Facebook,
Right.
like how they weren't going to comply with this. They simply didn't comply
Yeah.
because they weren't going to, right?
Yeah.
Now, the king is angry and he confronts them and says, look, is this true? I'm going to give you a chance. We're going to do this again. And if you're ready to comply, then do it.
Yeah.
If not, I'm going to throw you in there. And you know what? Nobody can save you from my hands.
What God will be able to rescue you from my hand? Well, the same God that just told you your dream.
Yeah. The God that you said was the Lord of Kings.
Yeah.
Right?
That God.
That God, yeah. And I love how they respond. They say, we have no need to answer you. This is really telling. I also love it too. Like in my version, I don't know how it reads in yours, but in my translation here, they replied to the king, Nebuchadnezzar. They just called him by his name. They didn't call him king. They just said, Nebuchadnezzar. We are
In my version, they say King Nebuchadnezzar.
okay.
Yeah.
So it's probably.
Sorry, I messed it up.
No, he's fine. So it's probably not a thing there, but to me, I was like, oh wow, that's funny. But they go in and they say, we are not in need of an answer to give you concerning this matter. Basically, they're like, we don't have to answer to you.
Yeah.
Like, there's nothing that we need to say. We don't need to come up with an excuse. We don't need to do any of that. We're going to tell you plainly, and we're going to do so unashamedly.
Right.
Right? And they're like, look, we serve a God that will save us and can save us if he so chooses.
Mm-hmm.
But if he doesn't, it's not because he's not strong enough to deliver us.
Right.
It's because he chooses not to.
Mm-hmm.
And either way, you lose.
Yeah.
Because we would rather worship a God who will allow us to be thrown into the fire because he is the true God
Yeah.
than to worship a false idol made by the hands of man.
Right.
Right? And so they just say it plainly.
Yeah.
Right? And I think it says a lot. I think there's a lot we can learn from how they do this.
Yeah, and I think that is interesting. That they say if God chooses, great. If not, we understand it. We'll be better off because we'll be in heaven.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah. They don't say that, but that's kind of what you can think with what they're
Yeah.
thinking.
We'll go to our God.
Yeah.
All right. So the text continues in verses 19 through 23. Then Nebuchadnezzar was filled with wrath, and his facial expression was changed toward Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He answered by giving orders to heat the furnace 7 times more than it was usually heated. And he ordered certain valiant warriors who were in his army to tie up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in order to throw them into the furnace of blazing fire. Then these men were tied up in their trousers, their coats, their caps, and their other clothes, and were thrown into the middle of the furnace of blazing fire. For this reason, because the king's command was harsh and the furnace had been made extremely hot, the flame of the fire killed those men who took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. But these 3 men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell into the middle of the furnace of blazing fire, still tied up. All right, so I'm going to stop there because I think this is interesting. We see Nebuchadnezzar again. He is a roller coaster, and he's at 11 here.
Yeah.
Right. He's furious. It's in his face, and he says, "Turn up the heat 7 times." Right.
Yeah.
And then he has them tied up by valiant warriors, and it says that they're also in their coats, hats, and other clothes, which I think is interesting. Right.
Yeah.
So, like, we know it's hot, like. But this is also like more kindling,
Yeah.
right? This is
Yeah, and I think I think that it's important to remember that every word in the Bible is there for a reason.
Yeah.
This is just like one of the funniest verses in the Bible is when Jesus raises Lazarus from the dead, and everybody's like, Jesus, he's gonna stink. He's been in there like a couple days, and like the reason they say that was in there is just so you can understand. No, it wasn't that he wasn't dead and then he came back to life like a couple hours later. Like he's been dead for days and he's starting to decompose, and God and Jesus brought him back from the dead. So that's why these words are in here. He's like, because like your skin isn't really going to catch on fire unless something is on it. The hair might, but your skin is not going to catch on fire. Your shirt, your pants, your hair, your hat, that stuff's all going to catch on fire.
Yeah.
And they got it all, and they didn't just tie them up. The strongest men in Babylon tied them up, made the knots as tight as they could possibly be.
Yeah, absolutely. And then what we see here too is the king ends up in his anger sacrificing some of his most valiant men. Right. The men who throw him in die.
Yeah.
As they throw them in because it's too hot and the flames get to them.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so he is so angry. He has no problem. And we saw this already. He was willing to kill all of his wise men. Right.
Yeah.
So this is nothing to him.
Yeah.
To let these people die. Right. So they throw them in and they are still tied up when they get thrown in.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so let's see how this resolves with verses 24 through 27. Then Nebuchadnezzar the king was astounded and stood up quickly. He said to his counselors, "Was it not 3 men that we threw bound into the middle of the fire?" They replied to the king, "Absolutely, O king." He responded, "Look, I see 4 men untied and walking about in the middle of the fire, unharmed, and the appearance of the 4th is like a son of the gods." Then Nebuchadnezzar came near to the door of the furnace of blazing fire. He said, "Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, come out, you servants of the Most High God, and come here." Then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came out of the middle of the fire. The satraps, the prefects, the governors, and the king's counselors gathered together and saw that the fire had no effect on the bodies of these men, nor was the hair of their heads singed, nor were their trousers damaged, nor had even the smell of fire touched them. All right. So King Nebuchadnezzar is astounded, right? He's immediately kind of taken aback. He's surprised, he's shocked, and he's shook. His guards died just putting the guys in the pit.
Mm-hmm.
But now they're just walking around in it untouched. And they're no longer tied up, right? The last verse ended with them. They were still tied up when they were thrown in.
Yep.
Now they're not tied up. So the bonds have been burned off.
Right.
Right.
Or just fell off or whatever.
You're right.
We don't really know. Yeah.
Right. So this in itself is already a big deal.
Yeah.
They're just walking around in the fire. But then there's a 4th man who's standing there with them, right? And he says, and in my version, it says he looks like a son of the gods, but the other translation will say the Son of God. Ultimately, this is a phrase that's going to continue through the book of Daniel.
Yeah.
Like this is truly a being of heaven.
Right.
Right. And so the king.
Yeah. When it's funny because when we talked about earlier when the wise men or whatever said only a God could do that. No God on earth can do that. And now we see a God on earth.
Yeah. Yeah. They were very adamant. Like God doesn't come down to men.
Yeah.
God doesn't come with men. And so we see like God first gives Daniel the knowledge, right?
Yeah.
But even that is still a little bit separated.
Yeah.
Right? Like he can do that from heaven.
Yeah.
Here is God on earth.
Yeah.
Right. Which is pretty amazing. And so the king calls them out, and in doing so, when he calls them out, he recognizes in word that they are servants of the Most High God.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm going to point this out here. He still is in that same realm of you're the servants of the Most High God.
Yeah.
Right. He is not giving up his stuff at this point. He's pointing out that they serve God.
Yeah.
Right. And there are tons of people there that witness this. And I think it's interesting there. They say their trousers were not damaged. And there was not even a smell of fire. Remember all the clothes they were wearing?
Yeah.
Right. So like they're fine.
Yeah. That's exactly why this ended. Yeah. Because they just got done telling all the thing that they were wearing and none of it was burned. Not even the smell of fire was on them. If I sit next to a campfire for an hour, I have to wash whatever I was wearing because it smells like smoke.
Exactly. Exactly.
They were in the fire.
Yeah. All right. So why don't we wrap this up? We're going to look at verses 28 through 30. Nebuchadnezzar responded and said, "Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and rescued his servants who put their trust in him, violating the king's command, and surrendered their bodies rather than serve or worship any god except their own God. Therefore, I make a decree that any people, nation, or population of any language that speaks anything offensive against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be torn limb from limb, and their houses made a rubbish heap, because there is no other God who is able to save in this way." Then the king made Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego prosperous in the province of Babylon. So for the second time in as many chapters, King Nebuchadnezzar gives glory to God for what he's accomplished, right?
Ish. Glory-ish, yeah.
Right? He recognizes that God, and he does say, like, only their God could do this.
Yeah.
Like, he's never seen this type of result from any of the gods he's served.
Yeah.
Right? He doesn't believe, like, see, I think at this point in this day and age, people say, well, you know, gods don't exist because they don't do these things.
Yeah.
Right? Back then they said, well, gods don't do these things because they can't.
Yeah.
Right? And God was like, oh, but I can.
Yeah.
Because,
Watch me.
Yeah, because I'm God. Those things are not.
Yeah.
Right? Whether they are figments of their imagination or they are other spirits or whatever you would have it be, there is only one God.
Yeah.
Right? And he acknowledges that their God has protected them and that the fourth man in the fire is from, at the very least, is from their God. Right? He sent an angel, which the word angel just is ultimately just means messenger or sent one, basically someone who was sent by God. And so the king now threatens death for anyone who would speak badly of the God of these men. And he rewards them and makes them prosperous.
Yeah, so he's taking it a step further here.
Yeah.
The last time he saw God do something, he's like, "Well, your God is more impressive, So good job, cool." Now he's making sure that everybody else is like, "Okay, nobody else talk about these guys' God."
Yeah, I think
He's taking it a step further, and he's threatening more violence against people for what they say about the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego.
I really think it's interesting though, like.
Even though he just got done saying it right before then, like, "Your God can't deliver you from my hand."
Right. Exactly. Oh, no, yes, he can. Okay.
Yeah.
He respects this God.
Yeah.
He doesn't worship this God.
Yeah.
Right? Because you take a look at what happens. He acknowledges that only this God could do these things. Mm-hmm. And he says, and for that reason, you can't speak poorly about him.
Yeah.
Now, he doesn't tell people to stop worshiping his statue.
Yeah,
He doesn't
exactly.
tell people to stop worshiping their gods. He doesn't tell people to stop living. He just basically says, don't make fun or speak poorly about their God.
Yeah.
Right. So this raises some really interesting questions about what did happen next there. But, did they stop worshiping the statue? Did the Israelites just get a pass?
Yeah.
Like what, or did they just stop issuing the death penalty for it? Right.
Yeah.
It's kind of an interesting thing, but he doesn't go as far as to say we're going to worship this God because he is the God.
Yeah.
Instead, he's just like, well, we're going to respect
Yeah.
that he's their God,
For sure.
right? And that is how chapter 3 ends. Any other thoughts or feelings before we move on?
When they talked about that fourth figure in there with as Son of God, when you think Son of God, that's Jesus, right?
Yeah.
And it's not really expressly said that is Jesus for sure, because we think Son of the gods, and so it's.
Some of that is just a translation, but
Yeah.
it's really the same.
Yeah.
It's really the same thing, right? It's a specific description of something that is of a divine nature, that is from a divine God.
Yeah.
Right. And Nebuchadnezzar says it could be an angel.
Yeah.
Right. But like there are cases where they talk about the angel of the Lord. I feel like this is what he was referred to when he meets with Abraham.
Yeah.
Right. But like a lot of scholars will say, no, this is Jesus.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is a representation of God.
Yeah.
Right. It's not just an angel.
Right.
Right. So this could, I think this is something you could go deeper with. This is something we could do some more research on and kind of dive into what have scholars said, what have people who have read this said, what was the tradition, what did the Jewish people believe, how did they look at that?
Yeah, for sure.
I think that's something that's worth going deeper on.
Yeah, totally.
All right. So we hope you're getting something out of this. We hope you're enjoying this. We will see you next time with chapter 4.